There's a detail about World War II that rarely appears in documentaries, yet it affected every soldier, on every front, every single night. Before bullets, before artillery, before any officer's orders, men battled the cold. Veterans wrote about nights where temperatures dropped so fast that rifles froze to the ground, blankets turned stiff as boards, and breath crystallized into frost inside their own collars. And yet armies on the Eastern Front, the Alps, the Ardennes and the Arctic Circle all somehow kept their frontline troops alive through conditions that would kill an unprepared person in hours. So, in this opening minute, think about what this question really means. How did ordinary soldiers, many of them barely out of training, manage to sleep in open fields, trenches, forests and ruined buildings while temperatures collapsed to -30 degrees Celsius or worse? The answer isn't one technique. It's a system of old fieldcraft, improvisation and hard-learned tricks that kept men alive when all modern comforts disappeared. And today we're breaking down exactly how they did it, with clear examples so you can understand the real survival logic behind those wartime nights. Understanding how soldiers use ground insulation as their first and most important survival tool. The real enemy in winter wasn't always the air temperature, but the frozen ground. A soldier lying directly on snow or ice loses body heat 3 to 4 times faster. World War II troops solved this by creating improvised ground insulation anywhere they stopped. Germans on the Eastern Front filled their Zeltbahn shelters with straw, birch branches, pine boughs or torn-up sacks. Soviet troops dug shallow sleeping pits and lined them with anything dry, even discarded newspaper. American infantry in the Ardennes placed ration boxes beneath their bedrolls, using cardboard as a thermal buffer. The principle was simple: create an air gap between the body and the ground. You can apply the same concept in modern survival. If you have nothing, gather dry vegetation and stack it thick. If vegetation is scarce, dig a shallow body-width trench and pack snow or soil around the edges to create walls that trap your heat. Even a thin layer of branches or clothing under you will prevent catastrophic heat loss, explaining how shared heat and buddy sleeping became a frontline lifesaver. While movies rarely show it, frontline troops often slept in pairs or groups during winter. Germans called it the sack trick. Soviets relied on it constantly, and Allied soldiers used it whenever orders allowed. 2 men would share overlapping blankets or one greatcoat, facing opposite directions to trap mutual heat without suffocating. In dugouts, 5 or 6 soldiers would lie hip to hip, radiating warmth into a small space so effectively that frost inside the shelter would melt slightly overnight. This was not something officers advertised, but it saved thousands of lives. A modern survival application is straightforward. If you're caught outdoors, share heat. 2 people inside one small shelter raise the interior temperature significantly simply by respiration. Even if each of you only has a thin cover, overlapping them creates a mini-chamber that traps warm air. Describing how fire was used safely, quietly and often invisibly, so troops could sleep without detection. Fire was both a blessing and a death sentence, depending on whether the enemy could see the flames. Troops learned to use what were called smudge fires or sleeper fires, small, deeply buried embers inside a pit covered with a metal mess tin or a flat stone. These didn't produce visible flames, but radiated warmth into the ground above. Some German and Finnish units used Siberian fires, placing 2 long logs parallel with a small ember bed between them and a top log angled over the fire to direct heat downward while hiding the glow. This technique allowed soldiers to heat a trench or dugout silently through the night. You can replicate the principle by using a buried ember bed with a stone cover. The radiant heat warms the soil and keeps a shelter's base temperature stable even after the flame dies, showing how clothing layering and moisture control mattered more than thickness. World War II soldiers didn't always have thick winter gear, but they managed moisture like survival experts. The rule was simple: wet equals dead. Soviet soldiers slept with their boots and gloves inside their coats so they wouldn't freeze stiff. German troops removed outer layers before sleeping to prevent sweat from cooling their bodies. Americans dried socks under their shirts using body heat. Even elite mountain units like the Italian Alpini slept with their wool layers partially open so they wouldn't sweat at the neck and chest, keeping their insulation dry. Modern survivalists can apply this by adjusting clothing before rest. Never sleep in wet socks or a damp shirt. Use your body heat to dry critical items inside your coat, and keep your outer layers ventilated so they don't trap moisture. Explaining how dugouts, snow shelters and ruined buildings were engineered for maximum heat retention. On the Eastern Front and in Scandinavia, soldiers built Kriegsvinterhütten, improvised winter huts made from logs, sod and snow. These worked like primitive Arctic cabins, using the insulating properties of packed snow to maintain a stable interior temperature. Soviet troops mastered the snow burrow, carving a low-ceiling chamber into a drift, blocking the entrance with a rucksack and creating a sleeping ledge so their bodies remained above cold air, settling at the base. In ruined cities, German and Soviet troops bricked up windows with rubble, stuffed cracks with clothing scraps, and slept behind makeshift windbreaks that cut wind chill dramatically. The teaching point is that even a weak shelter becomes powerful once its air leaks are sealed and the ceiling is kept low. In a survival situation, build a shelter smaller than you think you need. A compact chamber is easier to warm and easier to keep warm. Analyzing how soldiers heated their own bodies through food, timing and routine. A tactic mentioned frequently in journals was eating before sleep. High-calorie rations generated internal heat during digestion. Soviet troops ate hot kasha or bread before bedding down. American infantry used chocolate or pork fat rations. German troops drank hot ersatz, coffee or broth. The timing mattered. Eating right before lying down produced steady warmth that lasted for hours. Anyone applying this today can use high-fat foods, hot drinks or even warm water before sleep to boost internal heat production. Applying this historic winter survival knowledge today. If you study the frontline strategies of World War II, you discover that every trick had a simple principle behind it. Separate your body from the ground, seal your shelter, share heat, control moisture, keep your food cycle timed to your rest cycle. These methods aren't relics. They're tools anyone can adapt in cold weather emergencies, winter camping, or off-grid living. If you enjoy deep, practical history that still matters today, make sure you subscribe, share the video, and join us again here on In the Beginning for more forgotten survival knowledge that deserves to be remembered.